If you have your Bible, would you open it up to Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse 16. She gave me a script because I tend to go off script. So you'll have to excuse me. Matthew chapter 28, starting in verse 16. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age."
So that's what we were commanded to do. We moved to Ketchikan, an island of 14,000 people. And it's an island where it rains all the time. This is really not a Ketchikan day. This is a rare Ketchikan day. Usually it's rain. And we get 13 feet of rain a year, so it's a lot of rain. And we didn't know if we liked rain or not, but we actually like rain okay, so it's good. But when you move to a new community and you don't know anybody, it's a scary thing to do. And so how do you get plugged into a community? What do you do to get to know people? We were teachers, and so we decided to start subbing, even though we were told by our mission board, or at least by the people at camp, they said, "You're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to earn money." And it's like, we need to get into the community and get to know people. And so we started subbing anyway and really got to know teachers, got to know kids. It was a great way to get into the community. Besides that, we started a youth group at our church. All the pictures that you saw that were in the house were in our house. We lived two different places, and all those things, all those messes were at our house. It was kind of fun. He started coaching track from the beginning. We did Awana together. You saw pictures of that, and I was involved with church music. And through all of those things, we really got plugged into Ketchikan. In 2010, we bought a house, which was really, God just kind of presented this house to us. Amazing. Long story about how we got it, but God's hand was in that definitely. And we bought a house and felt more committed to being there. And by 2012, we felt like we were more needed in Ketchikan than we were at camp. And so we left camp in 2012. It was really hard being in Ketchikan for 6 months and working with the kids. And then all of a sudden you have to leave and say, "Well, we'll see you in September or October when we get back." And that got to be really, really hard. And we felt like we needed to be there year round with the kids. And so we left camp. And ultimately, we look back at our life and say, we really think we would have never moved to Ketchikan, not in a million years. But God took us to Echo Ranch to get us to Ketchikan, and that's ultimately where he wanted us to minister, and where we ended the last 10 years of our ministry in Ketchikan.
Going back to when we first left Bluffton to go to Ketchikan, we were there from January to April, and then we got ready to leave to go to camp. And Ketchikan is a transient place. A lot of people are very transient. There's a Coast Guard base there. Plus you have summer workers that come in and then they leave. And so we got ready to leave in April to go to camp for the very first time. And you know, we told the people, especially in the church, we told the people, okay, we'll be back in the fall. And because so many people had come and gone, they kind of looked at us, rolled their eyes, and said, "Yeah, right, you're going to come back." Well, we did come back. We came back in the fall, and we went into the church and got involved again. And we did the same thing in the fall. You know, we left, and they kind of rolled their eyes. And about the fourth year, and it took that long before they started to realize that, yes, we're coming back. And matter of fact, they came to us and said, "You are coming back, aren't you?" And when? So while we were at camp, and have any of you ever moved? Isn't moving fun? Well, we were moving twice a year. yeah, not all of our stuff, but in the spring and the fall, we had to move. And trust me, moving is not fun. So, when Pat said that in 2012, we chose to retire from Echo Ranch and go back to Ketchikan, that was the final move, until we bought the house.
Okay, and then in 2012, he started coaching basketball, and he got to see some of the basketball things, and he was a state champion. Our team that he helped coach won the state championship one year, which was an awesome experience. And they were kids that he had started coaching when they were in 7th grade. He coached them 7th and 8th grade just by himself. And then when they got to high school, he still continued coaching. He was still doing junior high at the same time, but he did both and got to coach them to a state championship, which was so exciting. And such a bond he made with those boys. I mean, he still talks to them online all the time, and such a huge connection we have with them. We also got involved with Young Life. I don't know if you know what that is, but we got involved with Young Life and Wildlife. Wildlife is a junior high program. Young Life is a high school program. And it's a lot like Youth for Christ. It's just a little bit different, but very similar. We would meet with the kids once a week and do a club with them. And then on Wednesdays, they would come to our house for lunch from the high school. We lived right up from the high school, and we would have, at first we started with 10 or 15, and by the end, by the time we left, we were getting 40 kids for lunch. And I was the cook. And we would cook and have all these kids come up. It's like 20 minutes of chaos. They'd all come in, grab food, and they're all over the house, and we're trying to talk to all of them and catch up on what's going on in their lives, and then they would head back to school. And some would just linger for a while, like, oh, we get back when we get back. And it's like, no, don't use this as an excuse. We don't want you to get in trouble. But it helped us build some great bonds with kids as well. And they would come to our house. I started Bible study for the high school girls. For post-high school, we had a group of girls that went through our youth group, and then they went off to college, and then they came back to town, and we did a Bible study with them, because there is nothing for kids that come out of college in our town. There was just nothing for them except to go to the bars. And so we started doing game nights. We started this Bible study. Whenever they wanted to do something, we said, yeah, come to our house. You can come hang out. You can do whatever you want to do. We want to keep you involved in good things and keep you away from the bars. And so it was a really fun ministry for me and the girls. In the summer, one of the things that was, we also started meeting with these 3 kids. There were 3 kids that social misfits, that's the best way to describe them. Nobody wanted to be around them. And they would come to our house every Thursday. We just got connected with them. The one gal, we met her when she was in kindergarten, and she was a special needs student in foster care. And we got connected with her early on and kind of stayed connected all the way through high school. And she and another guy and her brother came for dinner every Thursday night for I don't know how many years we had them. But we got to see a different side of Ketchikan through them, because they were in a different part of town than we were used to. But it gave us a connection to them, and we ministered to them for many, many years. They were very, very dear to our heart. We also started working summer jobs. You saw me in a lumberjack. I worked at a lumberjack show, not in the show by any means. That would be horrible. But I worked in the store at the lumberjack show in the summer, and you can tell what you did.
Well, my job was port security. Now, around here, there are no ports. But up there, we had 4 different ports. Ports are where the ships would come in and dock. Now, we're not talking about little boats now. We're talking about the cruise ships. And our job as port security was, first of all, to make sure that the ships were safe. In this day and age, it's very possible that someone could get close to a cruise ship, plant a bomb, and have a catastrophe. Well, our job was to try to make sure that the ships were safe. That was the first part of our job. The second part of our job was to try to keep the tourists safe. Any of you ever been on a cruise? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about when I say try to keep the tourists safe. When tourists get off the ships, they're like a herd of sheep. They just go. And they just go wherever they want to, whenever they want to, and whyever they want to. Is that true or not true? That's very true. Well, our job as port security was to try to keep them safe. And over the years, we had a number of people that would come off the ships, and I would find that there was a local connection.
Yeah, he got to know, what do they call it, the rough people. The longshoremen are a rough breed, and he got to know them personally. We'd go to the store and he'd talk to these longshoremen, and I'd say, who in the world was that? And he'd say, oh, it's a longshoreman. Well, yeah, but they would come talk to him all the time. And also, at the Lumberjack show, the Lumberjacks were a tough crowd too. And I worked in the concession area a lot, and I called it the confession booth because they spent a lot of time coming and pouring their hearts out to me. They knew I was different, and they would come and tell me stuff, some things I did not really want to know, but they came and talked to me. And we would invite them all to our house at least once a summer, sometimes 2 or 3 times a summer, and feed them, and we would play games. We'd pray before we ate. We have verses all over their house, all over our house. They knew what we stood for, and they respected that. They would never swear around me, or if they did, they went, oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Pat. So it was a really opportunity for us to really meet some new people in the community and to reach out and to a whole different crowd than we would have met any other way.
Longshoremen, in case you don't know, longshoremen are the people who are responsible for tying up the ships. And they have to use forklifts, and they have these ropes that are about 6 inches in diameter. They're really huge ropes, and well, they call them lines. They're not ropes, they're lines. And the longshoremen would have different groups of guys that would come and tie up the ships. And any of you ever been around people in the Navy? Okay, just thank the Lord that you have never been around them. Longshoremen can swear with anybody. I mean, their language is just unbelievable. And I got to know many of them on a personal basis. And it was really strange because around me, they cleaned up their language like crazy. It was amazing. But they had hearts of gold, and they would do anything for you. But you had to develop relationships, and that's what it was about, was developing relationships. This was a group of guys that, had I never worked on the port, I would have never had an opportunity to develop relationships with the guys on the port. The other group that I worked with were the other port security people. And the port security people, most of them were young people. Now, when I say young people, I'm saying under 25 years old. So a lot of them were high school kids, but there were 3 of us that worked on one particular port, and we called that the AARP port. Now, why do you suppose it was the AARP port? Yeah, it was us old guys. And there were 3 of us, and one of them in particular, his name was Gilbert Ramirez. And Gilbert stood about this tall, and he was about 65 or 66 years old. And Gilbert, I had a chance to minister to Gilbert quite a bit. You know, and Gilbert and I were really good friends. He was a sports guy, and we would all constantly go back and forth about who was the better tennis player or who was the better outfielder and this and that. And one day, this past summer, I get a phone call. And this was a day I wasn't working, so this was early in the morning. And I get a phone call from one of the guys who used to be our boss back a number of years ago. And the first thing he told me was, Gilbert died. Here's my friend. Who I had just worked with the day before. And he passed away during the night. But he did know the Lord. What if I hadn't had a chance to minister to him? It was heartbreaking. But I can thank the Lord that Gilbert is rejoicing today. Praise Jesus.
We met so many people there, and we had lived in Ketchikan for 19 years, well, for 18 years at this point, and we thought, well, we originally went to Alaska thinking we'll be there for 10 years. Well, here we are, actually 20-some years later, because we went back and forth to Ohio for a couple of years. But we had been there lots longer than we thought, and we didn't know how much longer we would be there. And then 2020 came along, and I was having some trouble with vertigo. My balance was really wonky. And I went to my doctor, and we were working on the vertigo, but I still had this pain in my side that every time I went to him, I just mentioned, I said, I have this little pain in my side. Not that I would come to you for that, but it just kind of bothers me every once in a while. Well, I think after my third visit with the doctor, and before I say that, every time before I went to the doctor, I would really pray about it and say, Lord, I think there's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. Would you please show the doctor what it is? So about the third time I went to him, and we were talking about the vertigo and what we're doing with it, and then I mentioned my side again, and he said, you know what, you say something about that every time. Why don't we go have a CT scan done just in case? So I went to the hospital and had a CT scan, and when I was walking out of the CT scan, they have trouble taking my blood. People hate when they see me coming because they can't get my blood out of me. And so the technician there said, the next time you get a CT scan done, tell them you need this kind of needle and you need this kind of person. And I thought he saw something on the CT scan, the fact that he's telling me that I need to do this again. My doctor called me immediately and said, you have a tumor in your kidney, and we need to get that out. The problem is there's no place in Ketchikan to do that. We have a hospital, but it doesn't do things like that. So our choice was going to Seattle or going to Anchorage or going someplace else. And we chose to go to Ohio State because we have a lot of people around here who could support us. And we didn't have anybody in Seattle or Anchorage. And so in the beginning of 2021, I had my kidney removed, and it was cancer, and they had to take the whole kidney. But this is an amazing thing. The doctors told me, he said, if you're going to have cancer, this is the place to have it because you can take it all out. But sometimes it has already spread, and they told me that on all the blood vessels coming out of my kidney, there was one that had maybe 2 little cancer cells in it, but all the rest were clean. But my whole kidney was filled with cancer. If we had waited any longer, it would have spread in my body. But God's timing, once again, made sure that I had that taken out before it spread over my body. But that made us start thinking that, okay, maybe we need to think about ending our time in Alaska, and we need to move someplace else where we have medical care. I want to read Ecclesiastes. Okay, look it up. And then we were down here also in the end of that year, and Rick had a issue with his heart. We happened to be here. We were visiting family. We just flew in on a Saturday, and Saturday night he was in the hospital with heart issues. And so he was in the hospital off and on for a week and had all kinds of things going on. Once again, it's like, okay, I think maybe it's time for us to be thinking about something else.
In your Bibles, if you would turn to Ecclesiastes, please. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This is probably one of those well-known verses or chapters that you've probably heard a number of times, but this really started to hit home with us. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1. There is a time for everything. And a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born. Excuse me.
We are still both very emotional from leaving. Let me start at the beginning. There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. This just became absolutely clear to us that our time up there needed to be done. But we needed to make sure that all of the things that we were involved with were covered. And about that time, we got a full-time director for Young Life, so we could back away. Somebody else took over, made sure Awana was going to keep going. All of the things we had our fingers in, somebody else came along to take our place, which is definitely God showing us that it's time to move. And so we told everybody like a while ahead that we were going to move. We were going to say goodbye to all our Young Life kids. We're saying bye to everybody up there and kind of closing everything off, which was very, very difficult because we were really invested in their lives. And then beginning of, this summer, we worked our summer jobs and we were going to, our plan was to move sometime in October and move back to Bluffton. And we decided we wanted to sell our house up there, and we thought we'll wait until September to even try to sell our house because we wanted to live there until the end of October. And during the summer then, different people wanted to come see our house. And so we said, okay, we'll show it to you. And we showed it, I think, 4 different times. One of the times was to this couple. They had just gotten married and they were looking for a house, and they looked at it and they loved our house, but it was not big enough for what they were wanting. They were gonna have kids and everything. But she went home and told her mom, who was our neighbor 4 houses down the street, and said, hey, Mom, I think you would like that house. And so our neighbor walks 4 houses up the street and came and looked at her house on a Saturday. On Sunday, okay, let me preface this. You know, house prices are crazy, and we were gonna ask a certain amount we had talked about, and everybody said, oh no, that's way too low. And so we kept upping it, no, go higher and higher. So we finally settled on this crazy amount that we thought was ridiculous. This lady came on Sunday the next day and offered us the full amount. We just were shocked, absolutely shocked. And so we started the process without a realtor or anything. We sold our house, and she was willing to let us stay there till the end of October. And she kept saying, this is such a God thing, because I needed a smaller house. I needed to be in the neighborhood because her grandkids walked to her house after school, and this was just a couple houses up the street. And then her daughter, who lived at our house, ended up buying her house. And so, I mean, God's hand was in this whole, we weren't even trying to sell it yet, and we sold it. Just an amazing thing how all of this worked. We already knew her, but we became very good friends with her too. Well, now we have the other end down here in Ohio where we need to have a house. And we had talked to realtors before when we were here, and we wanted a certain kind of house, and they kept maybe sending us stuff in a while, and nothing was just fitting. And I think it was in September, there were 2 different houses for sale, and we looked at them, and I even had friends go and look at them, and they just weren't the right fit. And then on a Saturday, my sister called and said, hey, they just put a for sale sign in the house across the street. And we said, okay, so we looked it up online, and it wasn't listed online yet. And so I looked on Monday, and there it was, and we both looked at it, and we went, oh, this checks all our boxes. It's awesome. So we called the realtor, who we happen to know, and she said, yeah, I'm showing it tonight. Have your sister come over and look at it tonight. So my sister went over, gave it a thumbs up, and so the realtor called back the next morning and said, what do you think? What did your sister think? And we said she really thought it would fit us perfectly. And she said, well, if you're interested, you need to put a bid in because we already have some already. And she said, you need to make it a good bid. And so we said on the spot, we told her what our maximum was going to be. We got the house. We owned it the next day without seeing it. And since then, there have been no houses up for sale on this realtor site. If we hadn't bought that house, we'd still be living with my poor sister. So once again, God sold our house. He found our house. If we had not sold our house for the amount that we did, we could have never afforded this house. but because all the money worked out also. We just saw God's hand in such a huge way. Well, we're back in Bluffton, so what do we do now? Do we stop doing anything? Are we retired? Do we sit around doing nothing? Not in our blood at all. We are substitute teaching in Bluffton schools. We are working with a youth group at Ebenezer Mennonite Church. I'm going to ICE camp at the end of February. We're getting involved here and doing here, maybe not everything we did up there, but some of the things we did up there. God's still using us. Our challenge to you is to think about, Alaska was not on our pages for a long, long time. God just kind of stuck that in our life. He nudged us there. Is there something here that's nudging you? Are you being nudged? Is there something that you can do even here at home? Is there a kid in the high school who's not going to make it unless a mentor comes and spends time with them and shows an interest in them? Is there some little kid who lost their mom or lost their dad and needs somebody to spend time with them? There's all kinds of things available, and I challenge you, if God is nudging you right now, step out. We would not trade 1 second of our time in Alaska for anything. It changed us, it grew us, changed us into people really wanting to serve God, and I really challenge you to do the same thing. That's our mission, is to go out and spread the word. And you don't have to go to Alaska. You can if you want. They're always looking for help at Echo Ranch. So if you want to go, you're welcome to go there. They would love to have you. But there's other places all around the United States and here in Lima as well, where you can serve and serve God. So if he's nudging you, do it. I advise you to do it. It's worth it.
I'd like to go back to Matthew and reread Matthew 28, starting in verse 16 again. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." That's your challenge. As Pat said, you don't have to go to Alaska. You don't have to go to Africa. Your mission field is right here. And your job as a believer is to tell others about him. You don't have to make him believe. That's the Holy Spirit's job. Your job is just to tell. Thank you very much for your prayers, your financial support over the years. It is, without those supports, we could have never have done what we did. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much for standing behind us and beside us as we walk the journey. Thank you.